friends, now we're working on chapter 2, the fundamental urge for knowledge. An interesting way of saying it. We have a fundamental urge to know. So he's examining why, or what is the nature of this fundamental urge. We have lots of fundamental urges, but among them is the urge to know. Yes? Why? Every child begins to ask that question. What age? 2, 3. Why? So again, this is where we come to this beautiful quote that comes from Goethe, from Faust, about the two souls. 2 souls, alas, dwell within my breast. Each wants to separate from the other. One in hearty love-lust clings to earth with clutching organs. The other lifts itself mightily from the dust to high ancestral regions. This is Goethe in Faust. So Goethe here characterizes a trait deeply embedded in human nature. We are not organized in a fully integrated way. Have you noticed? We are bipolar, schizophrenic, lacking integrity, however you'd like to say it. But we are torn. We are torn. We always demand more than the world freely offers. Nature gives us needs, and the satisfaction of some of these needs she leaves to our own activity. The gifts allotted to us are abundant, but even more abundant is our desire. We seem born for dissatisfaction. I'm going to tell you a quick story, all right? I was a young man back in the 60s who happened to be in the neighborhood of Emerson College, and he wandered into class, and they were reading this particular passage out of the Philosophy of Freedom, and he had an idea. He heard this line, "We seem born for dissatisfaction," and he wrote a song. And the song changed the world. And he even named he used the initials of the author of this word as the initials of his group. Who are we talking about? Mick Jagger. I can't get no satisfaction. And he calls himself the Rolling Stones. Instead of Rudolf Steiner, he chooses the Rolling Stones. So, see, Rudolf Steiner inspired Mick Jagger. It's not true, but any truth that comes to you from outside is subject to doubt. It's a good story. It would have been true. I don't think it really happened that way. But he could have, you see. But Rudolf Steiner got to the same place that Mick Jagger got. Way ahead of Mick Jagger. We seem born for dissatisfaction. Okay? Let's be honest about it. So, the urge to know is but a special case of this dissatisfaction. We're not satisfied. We're hungry. We're thirsty. We want the sun. We want shade. We want mountains. We want beach. We want comfort. We want love. We want isolation. We want freedom. We want whatever. So all these things. So we seem to be born to be dissatisfied. We seem to be born to it. But he says, if we look at the nature of knowledge, the same thing is there. We look at a tree. Twice. The first time we see the branches at rest. The second time the branches are moving. We're not satisfied with those two observations. We ask a question. Why were they still and why are they moving? What happened? You see? So we're not satisfied with what nature gives us. Nature gives us the miracle of everything we observe. It's glorious. Why aren't we satisfied with the beauty of what she gives? But we're not. Because we say, why is that? Or how is that? Or how did that happen? You see? So we're not satisfied with what the senses give us because somewhere deep inside us, we realize that something is missing. Something is beautifully given to us, but something is not given to us. We don't understand. You see? We don't understand what's given to us. We have to do something. So we always we're given beautiful facts by nature, but we always seek an explanation of the facts. You see a brilliant flash of light, yes, in a storm. And 20 seconds later, you hear this rolling thunder. And after a while, you begin to notice that those two things keep appearing more or less in the same context. Not much in California because we don't have as much thunderstorms here as we do in the Midwest, but you know what I mean. So light and sound, why aren't they simultaneous? And are they related? Why does sound always follow light? Does sound ever come before the lightning? Does the thunder ever happen before the lightning? No. If you were present where lightning and thunder are happening simultaneously, and I had the opportunity to do that on the 18th of February 1986 at Rudolf Steiner College, because there was a teachers' conference there, and they were studying the etheric world, and it was a coffee break. It was about 10:30 in the morning, and I was walking up toward the quad, where around some of you know that campus, and there was this beautiful tall digger pine tree. Digger pines are the ones that are so big that when they fall, they dig a big hole in the ground, called digger pines. This was the tallest tree in the area. Literally, you could see it from the freeway. It was the tallest tree in the area. Lightning struck it at 10:30 in the morning, and fortunately, people weren't sitting under it because it was raining. If people were sitting under it, it would have been even worse. They were just sitting around it about 30 feet away. But the lightning struck the tree, limbs shattered, windows were broken. But I was walking up the path exactly as it happened, and I noticed that the light and the sound were simultaneous. And I knew that was a problem. Wait a minute, I've never been to experience where light and sound are simultaneous. That's the tree. You see? And by golly, it was. We gradually had to take the tree down. But it was so. But you could say, but why? But we're not satisfied with the light and the sound. What's their relationship? Yeah. So we always want an explanation. And we also have heard, of course, that the longer the gap between the light and the sound, the farther away the phenomena is. But if you're in the same place, okay. So, but you see, we're not satisfied with what nature gives us. We seem to be born to be dissatisfied. So the desire to know is that I'm not happy, I'm not content with merely what I'm given. I have to ask a question to understand it. I don't understand until I do something else. So he says this feeling, that which we seek in things, we're looking for an explanation, that which we seek in the things of nature, over and above what is given to us immediately through our senses, splits our entire being into two parts. We become aware of standing in opposition to the world as independent beings. The universe appears to us as two opposites, I and the world. When we're a child, this is the picture. This is our picture. I and the world are one. But the more we begin to ask questions and the more we begin to doubt, what happens is something appears to split this into two parts, and instead of having one world, we have the sense that I live here and the world is out there. And there's something dividing me. And what happens is gradually this separates more and more into this, and gradually today it's more like this. Yeah? We feel completely isolated and completely independent of the world, but it's because we're searching for something that's not given to us. That something's not given to us. So because it's not given to us, we feel like we're separating from it, and gradually we become more and more isolated in the world. It seems like I live inside my body, and the rest of the world is outside me. That's the joy and the sorrow of becoming a human being, living in a body. Yeah? Whereas I used to feel unified with the world, the older I get, the more separate I feel, up to a point. Almost old enough now, I'm beginning to feel reconnected to it again. But the sense of isolation is part of the problem, and yet it's because we feel torn, because we feel divided, that we're looking for a way to bridge between ourself and the world. You with me? So we're looking for a way to bridge these two spheres. So the universe appears to us as two opposites, I and the world. We set up this barrier between ourselves and the world as soon as consciousness lights up within us. When does consciousness light up within us?
Age 3.
3. Yes, right around 3. 3, 4, right in that area. So in other words, when you begin to become aware of yourself as I, it is in distinction to something else. You see? Before you had that experience, I was one with my teddy bear, I was one with my pillow, I was one with my blanket, I was one with my food. But all of a sudden, when you become aware of yourself, all of a sudden those things are no longer a part of you. Yeah? And that feeling of separation gets bigger and bigger over time. Yeah. So it's this problem of feeling separated. Now, this feeling of separation engenders in us the desire to build a bridge between ourselves and the world. And so the whole history of our spiritual life is the whole spiritual striving of humankind. The whole spiritual striving of humankind consists in our searching to bridge this opposition between the feeling of self and the world. That's the reason for our spiritual striving. We're searching for the Grail. Yes? But the Grail somewhere is out there, and I'm over here, and somehow I've got to find it. You see? You with me? Mm-hmm. So, the history of spiritual life is a continual searching for the unity between I and the world. Religion, art, and science all share this goal. The religious believer tries to build this bridge, tries to build a bridge between these two things. So we have the religious believer tries to build that bridge through revelation. Yeah? The religious believer will say, well, someone experienced a burning bush, and the burning bush told him something, yes? So I believe it, because it was good enough for Moses, it's good enough for me. The religious believer will take the fact of revelation, not necessarily revelation to me, but revelation to somebody. God spoke to Moses. That means that God was speaking through Moses to the rest of us. Therefore, if I am a religious believer, I will take what Moses heard from God to be the commandments, yes? Mm-hmm. So the religious believer tries to build a bridge between self and world by following the revelations given by those who did experience God, even though I don't. Now he says the artist also tries to build this bridge. The artist tries to do it, however, the artist tries to do it by incorporating the substances of the world with their ideas, their imaginations. A painter will take paint and try to arrange the paint into an image of something which is their own image, an image that they created. A musician will take musical instruments and will try to create sound and arrange sound in such a way that it's stamping itself into the sound, and somehow then it can honor that at least for a moment while the music is playing, it is one with the world. So the artist is trying to incorporate the materials of the world and unify them into an expression of the artist. And it's a lovely attempt. And art does get us closer to a feeling of unity, at least for a while. Now he says science. The scientist is also trying to do the same thing. Thinkers, the philosopher and the scientist thinkers, are also trying to build that bridge. So thinkers are trying to build the bridge between the separation between I and the world by seeking the laws of the phenomenon. So the artist tries to do it through artistic creativity, through artistic creation, to embody the world in its artistic impressions, its artistic creativity. The thinker tries to understand the laws. The laws of the phenomenon. And by so doing, if I can understand why the sun rises in the east and culminates in the south and sets in the west, in the northern hemisphere, if I can begin to understand, if I can think those laws through, I have to ask the question every morning, the sun is over there, and then at noon it's up there, and then at sunset it's over there, and why? So if I can begin to discover the laws, the question is the sky turning, or is the earth turning? Or is neither one of them turning? What is it just me? But the thinker is trying to seek the laws of phenomena as an attempt to build a bridge between the fact that we're not one with the phenomena, we feel separate from them. So we're trying to find an explanation. Yeah? Now, he says, in answer to all these three, he says, only when we have made the world content into our thought content do we rediscover the connection from which we have sundered ourselves. Only when we make the content of what we receive with our senses, only when we think it through do we feel our connection once again. We shall see later that this goal is reached only when the task of scientific research are understood more profoundly than often occurs. Now he says basically the history of the world is drawn up these battle lines in two grounds. There are people who call themselves monists. The monists are basically the people that say, you know what, there's really only one world. I and the world are one. When I lived in Seattle, there were some friends who lived up on Queen Anne Hill. We had a group of people living on Capitol Hill, and there were other people, friends. We had another commune kind of living on Queen Anne Hill, and they were monists truly. And so you would go to their house and you'd have a potluck with them, and there were children running around at different ages, and you'd say, what a beautiful child, how old are they? And the answer was, well, that child is eternal. But in fact, they're 5 years old. But the first answer is, you see, the age is nothing. The child is eternal. What difference is it? But, okay, but you're asking the question of, but some monism, the world is one. You see, it doesn't matter whether the child is 5 or 50. We're all one. So there was a sense of we're all one. Yeah. So monism says there is no difference. Even though we experience a difference, there isn't a difference. Now that's a problem. Yeah. It's just an illusion that there's a difference. Somehow we've got to convince ourselves with monism, at least the monisms that were attempted up to Rudolf Steiner's time, there was not a satisfactory way for us to solve the riddle of monism. But the other worldview is called dualism. Dualism says there really is a bridge. There really are two worlds. There really is a sense of self. I and the world are really different. So there are two worlds. Dualism is a two-world view and monism is a one-world view. However, the problem is dualism sets up these absolute conditions so completely differently that it's very difficult to find a bridge through dualism. A dualistic philosophy that doesn't find a mediating bridge between the two of them remains unsatisfactory. But also does an explanation where we're all one. Well, aren't men and women different? No, we're all one. Well, how come? Then the laundry list begins. How come we have such differences? And so you see what I mean. So all of a sudden we begin to realize, no, in fact, there are a lot of variations. How come I don't experience oneness? I experience myself as separate. Why is that? So now he says, he tries to say there are three versions of monism that try to blur. He says dualism is really kind of a failed point of view because it builds up an absolute wall and says there's nothing of relationship between the two. The separation is so complete, you'll never build a bridge. Forget it. Dualism ends up kind of in that camp. Monism is trying to build a bridge, but he says monism tries to do it and has tried to do it up until the writing of the Philosophy of Freedom in three different ways. On the one side, he said monism either says the world is all matter, so materialism is a form of monism that says there is really only a material world. Materialism says the world is matter, period. And so materialism is a form of monism, say everything, including my sense of self and the sense of the body and even the idea of God, it's all just matter. Matter has just evolved. The Big Bang happened, and then the solar system was formed, and the galaxies formed, and then basically everything just evolved out of matter. That's all it really is. Matter is the source of everything. So materialism is one attempt to say the world is all material. But somehow that doesn't find complete satisfaction with us. Now let's erase that one for a moment, or let's just blur it for a moment. Let's say there's a second worldview that says, no, the world is spirit. Yeah? Spiritism, spiritualism. Which one does he use? Spiritualism, yeah? So materialism is one worldview, spiritualism is a second worldview. Matter is just an illusion, everything is just spirit. Matter is just a temporary state of spirit, and spirit in fact is all. Spirit is everything. There really is no material world, there's only a spiritual world. And that which appears to be material is merely a temporary aberration in the reality that everything is really spiritual. Yes?
Is this like the Eastern Indian, the world is mana?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the world is Maya.
Maya.
So you could say, now, you're broken down on the freeway. You have just enough battery left to make a phone call, okay? On your cell phone. You're in the middle of nowhere, you got a flat tire, you can't fix the flat, you got no flat, you got no spare. You're in the middle of nowhere, you got one phone call, who are you going to call? So you can call your guru, you can call your spiritual teacher and say, dear spiritual teacher, I'm broken down on the freeway and I don't know what to do. Oh, my dear son, well, this is just a temporary condition and it's just Maya and illusion. There really is no freeway and there really is no breakdown and this is just a temporary aberration. It's going to be fine. Click. Whoops. Okay, well, that wasn't very satisfactory. Now, so somebody comes by and they've got a cell phone. So I make a second call and I call the tow truck. I call the local AAA or whoever it is. And fortunately, a guy drives out there in his big. These guys are wonderful, by the way. Do you know? These are heroes in my mind. They've saved me more than once. So a guy drives up in a big truck with a big tow truck, and he figures out. He asks you questions, and can he fix it right away? And then he finally, he gets out and he tows the truck over. And so you're riding in the cab with him on the way back to the garage, and you say, when I'm meditating, I always come to this particular place in my meditation. And when I get right to this position, I've been doing these breathing exercises and I've been thinking these meditative thoughts. And when I get to this particular place, the guy looks over at me. I don't know what world you live in, buddy, but I tow cars. This is the real world. I don't know where you're from, but So there are people, however, there are very spiritual people who are tow truck drivers. Believe me, I'm not putting them down. And there also are very practical spiritual advisors. I'm just using that as an example. But to say neither spiritualism by itself or materialism by itself is a satisfactory answer. In fact, Rudolf Steiner, he starts with the problem of materialism. If I'm saying that the world is material, but then I end up with two things. I end up with the material world and my thoughts about the material world. And now, where did my thoughts come from? Did the material world create my thoughts? And he says there are philosophers that say, yes, the brain secretes thoughts the way spit glands secrete spittle. Yeah? It's a point of view. Yeah? It's a hard one to defend. The brain creates thoughts. The brain secretes the thoughts. It doesn't really match with my experience, but there are people who say, so matter creates thoughts, and thoughts then are reflecting matter. Not too satisfactory. But neither can a purely spiritual world, because if I only have a spiritual perspective, I also have the idea. In fact, I tend to put myself as a human being, as a spirit. If I'm a spiritual believer, I believe that I also am a spirit, more than likely. Unless I'm the tow truck or something else. So if I'm a spiritualist, I tend to associate myself as a spiritual being. But then I have to deal with this darn body, which belongs to the rest of the phenomenal world, which is the material world. How do I, as a spiritual being, live in the material world? There have been songs written about that. Yes. So how? So what? That's not very satisfactory either, because how do I, as a spiritual being, influence matter? And what is my relationship to the body? And how come I'm stuck with it anyway? And what can I do without it or not? Yeah? So neither point of view is very satisfactory. Now, Steiner says there's a third variation which has been attempted, but neither of these two are very satisfactory. The third variation that's been attempted, he calls, it's where spirit and matter are bonded together. And we seek the same phenomena in both conditions. The third variation, it's on page 24. A third form of monism sees both essences, matter and spirit, as already united in the simplest entity, the atom. But here too, nothing is achieved except that the question which actually originates in our consciousness, is displaced to a different arena. If the atom is an indivisible unity, how does a unitary entity manage to express itself in a twofold way? Because an atom is also, so an atom, this wonderful theory of Einstein, yes, that matter and energy are just two sides of the same coin. But how, if it's one thing, how come it expresses itself in two different forms? You see? So quantum physics is also an attempt, if you will, to say, no, there's something, matter and spirit are both connected in the atom or the building block. We're looking for the God particle even today. We're looking for the God particle that somehow explains everything, but we're not really going to find the answer, because the answer doesn't arise in spirit or in matter or in the atom. The question of separation arises in me. It arises in the individual. I have to solve the riddle. It's not the atom that's split into two parts. It's me, in the way I'm perceiving the atom, that sees it in two different forms. So the question of separation is a question, it's not that the world feels separated. I can't say that the atom feels separated from matter or spirit, but I can certainly say that I feel separated from them. The question arises in me. I have to find the solution within me. So basically he's turning the whole science of thinking and the science of looking at the laws of phenomenon back to, we need to observe the human being, because the human being is a participant in all this, and this is the beauty of what Rudolf Steiner develops as spiritual science. We need to understand the human being, because the human being is related to the whole world, and yet is a special instance of it. But in what way are we an instance of the spiritual world and the natural world? So that leads us into the whole study of anthroposophy. So he says, it's quite beautiful. He also gets here way before Joni Mitchell. He says, it is we who separate ourselves from the native ground of nature and place ourselves as I in opposition to the world. We separate from nature and put ourselves in opposition to her. Goethe gives us its classical expression in his essay, Nature. Goethe says, we live in nature's midst, and yet we're strangers to her. We live right in the bosom of nature, and yet we're strangers to nature. She speaks with us continually, but she does not betray her secret to us. Quite lovely, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But Goethe also knows the reverse aspect. All humans are within nature, and she in them. Paradox. Now, how do we live with this paradox? Now, so Rudolf Steiner, here's the Joni Mitchell quote. It is true we have estranged ourselves from nature. It is just as true that we feel we are in nature and belong to her. It can only be her activity that lives in us. Nature's activity lives in us. We must find the way back to her again. Does this sound familiar? Mm-hmm. We have to find a way back to nature, yes? We're at Woodstock, yeah? A simple reflection can show us the way. You guys were at Woodstock, but I almost was. We must find a way back to her again. Well, a simple reflection can show us the way. To be sure, we have torn ourselves away from nature, but we must have taken something with us of her into our own being. Now, this translation is not correct. I'm going to read you the correct translation. We must seek this essence of nature within ourselves. Your translation in this book says we must seek out this natural being within ourselves, which to a Woodstock generation means something different than Rudolf Steiner meant. It's not that we're searching for the natural being, it's rather we're searching for the essence of nature. We must find this essence of nature within ourselves, and then we will rediscover our connection to nature. Dualism can't do this. It considers the inner human being as a spiritual being foreign to nature, and then seeks to attach the spiritual being to nature. No wonder it can't find the connecting link. We can only find nature outside us if we also know nature within us. Here's the riddle, friends. The question, what is akin to nature within us will be our guide. Our way is thus mapped out for us. We don't speculate about the interaction of nature and spirit. We wish to descend into the depths of our own being to find there those elements we have saved in our flight out of nature. The investigation of our own being must bring us the solution to the riddle. We must come to a point when we can say to ourselves, here I am no longer merely I. There is something here that is more than I. Now that's the way he ends chapter 2. The fundamental urge to know. So he leads us with a question. the question really is, we have to seek the essence of nature within us. And then, only then, when we find what is akin to nature within us, will we be able to find our link to nature once again. What is this link? What does nature have in her that we have in us, besides the elements of the body? What do you think?
Development. Transformation or development.
Yes, transformation, development. Yes.
Connection to the environment.
Yes.
It's one and the other melded.
That's right. So, but there's something within us, there's something working in us that's also working in her. And we have to find what's working in her that we link up to within us that helps us understand her. What would that be? What helps us understand her? Thinking. You see? Thinking. Nature is thinking. There's a quality of nature. We would never be able to discover the laws of nature. We'd never be able to discover the laws of nature if they weren't there. And we have access to the laws of nature because those same laws we have access to our thinking about the growth and the metamorphosis of plants. The laws of the sunrise and the sunset, we can find a link to those phenomena because the same processes that nature is using to produce them as an artist, we have access to through our thinking. So friends, beginning to think as nature thinks is what led Goethe to his tremendous discoveries. We have to learn to think in accordance with the phenomena that nature is producing, and then we will find our relationship back to her once again.